She didn't recognize the woman at first, just another polite customer, you see, with kind eyes. But when the waitress, Kalin, opened the checkbook and saw the name, Jasmine Crockett, and what she'd written, well, she broke down right there on the floor. The lunch crowd was long gone, and the dinner rush hadn't quite started yet. Which meant, for a brief window, the place fell into that strange middle ground where the clinking of forks and low chatter gave way to a dragging, almost heavy silence. Kalin wiped the edge of the counter with a rag that had definitely seen better days. Her name tag sat slightly crooked, and her white sneakers, once bright, were now smudged with months of double shifts and forgotten breaks. She'd been at Bill's roadside diner, off Highway 290 in Brenham, Texas, for almost 4 years. It wasn't glamorous, not at all, but it paid the bills, most days. She kept her head down, kept her hands moving, and tried not to think too hard about the bills stacking up, about her mom's hospital visits, about the fact that she hadn't sat down for a proper meal in 2 days. That Thursday had been dragging, one of the fry cooks called out sick, 2 tables walked out without tipping, and the coffee machine kept spitting grounds into the pot like it was doing it on purpose. Kalin had been up since 5 a.m. and was now riding the edge of that fragile line between functioning and barely holding it together. "Hey, table 7 just sat down," Rosa called out, pointing behind her. Kalin didn't even look up at first, she just scribbled the ticket number onto her notepad and walked over. Apron tied tight, eyes half dead, she expected a couple, maybe a trucker. Instead, it was just one woman, alone. The woman looked to be in her late 30s, maybe early 40s. Her hair was pulled back into a soft twist, no makeup, no jewelry, just a green blouse and faded jeans. She had this calm, unbothered presence, didn't check her phone, didn't look rushed, just sat quietly, hands folded, eyes gently scanning the menu. "Evening," Kalin said, slipping the notepad from her apron. "What can I get started for you?" The woman smiled. "Just coffee and the chicken fried steak, please. Extra gravy, if that's okay." Kalin jotted it down, gave a polite nod, and turned to walk back, but paused when she heard the woman say, "Take your time, by the way. No rush. I'm just here to breathe." Something about that sentence, "I'm just here to breathe," stuck with her. Not complain, not sigh, not demand extra ketchup or grill her about gluten, just breathe. She served the meal. About 15 minutes later, the woman thanked her, never once asking for a refill, or a side plate, or even glancing around impatiently like most solo diners. She ate slowly, like someone who wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere else. Kalin kept peeking over, partly out of habit, partly out of curiosity. The woman had a strange comfort about her, familiar somehow, though Kalin couldn't place from where. It didn't really matter, though, her feet ached, her head was buzzing, and she still had 2 hours left on the clock. When the woman finally asked for the check, Kalin brought it over, slid it onto the table with her usual tired, half-smile, and walked away before the awkward moment where people fumble for cash or stare awkwardly into space, pretending they don't notice you waiting for a tip. She returned to table 7 5 minutes later. The woman was gone, but the check folder was still there. Kalin picked it up, assuming maybe the woman had gone to the bathroom or to her car. She opened it out of habit, ready to tuck the receipt and count the tip. Instead, there was a folded piece of paper inside, not a receipt, not cash, a note. She looked around, no sign of the woman, just the note neatly placed, tucked between the leather folds like it was waiting to be found. Her fingers hesitated over it for a second, something felt different. She unfolded the paper. 4 lines, handwritten in smooth black ink, and a signature at the bottom. "I know what you did. You think no one saw, but someone did. It changed more than you'll ever know. Jasmine Crockett. Your like and comment tell the algorithm these stories deserve to be heard. Thanks for your support." The pen slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a dull clink. That name, she'd heard that name before. Her stomach turned, not from fear, but from recognition, but she couldn't remember where or when, not yet. But something about that name started pulling at old memories, like a thread on a sweater you should have left alone. Kalin stared at the paper as if it had started breathing. The handwriting was delicate but deliberate, someone who didn't rush their words. But it wasn't the penmanship, or even the message, that shook her, it was how those words felt, like they had been peeled out of a corner of her life she had tried to forget. "I know what you did." Her fingers trembled slightly as she read it again, slower this time. The lines weren't threatening, they didn't accuse. If anything, they felt grateful, personal, private. And then there was that name, Jasmine Crockett. It wasn't just familiar, it echoed. She pulled out her phone, fingers clumsy and unsteady, and typed the name into Google. Dozens of headlines popped up almost instantly. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett addresses youth homelessness in Texas, rising political star speaks on mental health support for low-income communities, Crockett calls for reinvestment in rural public health. Kalin's breath caught. A congresswoman? That quiet woman with the green blouse and soft voice? No security, no fuss, just her sitting at table 7, asking for extra gravy like anyone else. But that didn't explain the note, or how she knew her, or what she meant by, "what you did." Kalin tucked her phone back into her apron and walked to the back, into the cramped break room that doubled as a supply closet. She sank into the plastic chair, the one with the chipped armrest and a stain from someone's spilled chili 3 months ago. The note rested in her lap. She closed her eyes and tried to think. Her brain started tracing every moment she could remember from the last 10 years, customers she'd met, people she'd helped, things she'd done that no one should have seen, except someone had. Someone named Jasmine. It took a minute, but then a memory surfaced. She was 19, living out of her car, broken, scared, doing temp work at a community center just south of Dallas. Her job was mostly janitorial, cleaning up after events, wiping down tables, locking up at night. There had been a girl, young, maybe 17, quiet, kept to herself, always came in early and stayed late. She looked like she didn't trust anyone. Kalin remembered her because she'd given her a sandwich one night after an event and asked if she was okay. The girl didn't answer, just looked at her, almost startled, then nodded once, took the sandwich with both hands like it weighed 10 pounds, and then disappeared. Kalin never saw her again. Could that have been Jasmine? She leaned back, staring at the ceiling like it might hold the answer. The pieces were fuzzy, but the feeling wasn't. That night had stayed with her, even though she never spoke about it. She didn't do anything dramatic, just fed a hungry kid and sat with her for a few minutes in silence. But maybe that was enough. She glanced back at the note, "You think no one saw?" Was it possible that moment, something she had all but forgotten, had meant something? She thought about the woman at table 7 again, her quiet eyes, her calm presence, not a trace of arrogance or ego, just warmth. And she'd left without saying anything, no dramatic speech, no long-winded explanation, just a note, 4 lines, and a signature that somehow wrapped itself around a memory Kalin had buried. She stood up slowly and folded the note back into her apron. She wasn't crying, not really, but her face felt hot, her throat tight. There was something about being seen, really seen, that tore open a part of you didn't even know was still closed. And for Kalin, that moment wasn't just unexpected, it was long overdue. But she still didn't understand how Jasmine had recognized her, or why now. Back on the floor, Kalin kept moving. Orders still had to be taken, plates cleared, coffee poured, but her body worked on autopilot while her mind stayed stuck on that name, Jasmine Crockett. A teenage girl with weary eyes and a sandwich in her hands, now a woman signing legislation and speaking to crowds. What were the odds? Between wiping down table 12 and refilling ketchup bottles, she managed to sneak glances at her phone. Jasmine's face was everywhere, C-SPAN clips, news interviews, community photos. Her expression changed slightly depending on the setting, but the eyes were still the same, still quiet, still sharp. Kalin clicked on a video from a recent town hall meeting in Austin. Jasmine stood at a podium, hands clasped lightly, talking about food insecurity and forgotten towns. Her tone was calm but firm, the way people speak when they've already lived the problem they're trying to fix. Kalin's stomach flipped when Jasmine paused mid-sentence, looked out at the crowd, and said, "Sometimes the biggest change in your life starts with the smallest kindness, a stranger noticing you exist." She stared at the screen, couldn't move. How many times had she felt invisible, like a ghost walking through her own life, taking care of everyone but herself? And now someone who had once been just a quiet girl in the corner of a rec center was out there changing laws and remembered her. It didn't make sense, unless... She opened the diner's back office when Rosa went out for a smoke break. The manager, Keith, was busy counting the register and didn't even glance up. Kalin slipped behind the desk and pulled up YouTube on the desktop computer. She searched for Jasmine Crockett interview plus early life. The results were overwhelming, but one interview stood out, a sit-down with a local Texas station. It was from last year. Kalin clicked. Jasmine sat on a worn leather couch, framed by bookshelves and houseplants. The host asked, "Was there a moment when things started to shift for you, when you felt seen?" Jasmine took a breath. "There was. I don't talk about it often. I was going through something hard, homelessness, to be honest. I was couch hopping, hungry, tired, and I went to this community center in South Dallas. One night, after a volunteer event, a young woman gave me a sandwich. She didn't ask questions, didn't talk down to me. She just sat with me, and in that silence, for the first time in a long time, I felt human again." Kalin's heart thudded in her chest. Jasmine continued, "I never forgot her. I didn't even know her name, but I remembered her face, and I remember thinking, if I ever got anywhere in life, I'd find a way to thank her." Kalin leaned back in the chair, her whole body frozen. That was her. She knew it. It wasn't about feeding someone, it wasn't charity, it wasn't some noble gesture. It was just one person seeing another, and for Jasmine, that had been enough to carry with her for years. But then why now? Why had she come today? Why this diner, in this small town? Brenham wasn't exactly on the political map. Kalin stepped outside for air. The breeze carried the scent of fried food and the sound of trucks rolling past, but all she could think about was that moment, that tiny, forgettable Tuesday night years ago had never really left Jasmine, and Jasmine had never really left it behind either. It wasn't coincidence, it couldn't be. Jasmine Crockett hadn't stumbled into the diner, she'd come on purpose. But for what? A thank you? A favor? Or something deeper? The next morning, Kalin couldn't shake the weight pressing down on her chest. She tried doing the usual, coffee, cold water on the face, blasting the local radio station in her car, but nothing helped. Her brain kept circling back to the same place, to that night at the community center. She remembered the girl clearly now. Jasmine had been sitting by herself, clutching a ripped backpack, wearing a coat 2 sizes too big. She hadn't asked for help, she hadn't cried, she just existed in that way some people do when they've been ignored for too long, small, careful, almost invisible. Kalin had offered her the extra sandwich without thinking, it was an afterthought, really, a leftover from the volunteers. But when she handed it over, she remembered something shifted in the air between them. Jasmine had looked at her, not with thanks, but with disbelief, like kindness was some kind of trick. And now here they were, one still wearing rubber-soled shoes and pulling doubles, the other standing in front of cameras and rewriting policy. It would have been easy to feel bitter about it, to wonder how someone could rise so far while you stayed exactly where you started, but Kalin didn't feel that, not now. She felt something else, like a thread had been sewn through her life without her knowing, and suddenly it pulled tight, connecting her to something bigger than routine and rent. So she made a decision, she was going to find Jasmine. Not through a fan email or a press contact, that wasn't her style. She wanted to look her in the eye and ask why now, why her, what the note meant, what Jasmine really remembered. She pulled up Jasmine's public calendar online and saw that she'd be speaking in College Station that Saturday, just under an hour away. Kalin requested the day off, though she could barely afford to. She didn't tell Rosa why, just said she had to take care of something important. Saturday came fast. Her hands shook slightly on the steering wheel as she pulled into the community hall parking lot. The lot was half full, families, college kids, older folks in jeans and polos, not the crowd she'd expected for a politician. But Jasmine didn't dress the part either. She stood at the front of the room, no podium, no fanfare, just a microphone and her presence. Her voice was warm but steady. She didn't speak like someone running for something, she spoke like someone trying to remember what it felt like to be forgotten. Kalin didn't hear half the speech, her heart was pounding too hard. She waited until it was over and people began to drift out. Jasmine shook hands, took a few photos, and smiled like she meant it. Then their eyes met. Kalin didn't move right away, she stood in the back, her mouth dry, feet planted. Jasmine tilted her head, curious. Recognition didn't flash instantly, but something flickered. She excused herself from the crowd and walked over slowly. "Hi," Jasmine said. "You're not from around here, are you?" Kalin gave a small laugh. "No, I drove in from Brenham." Jasmine paused. "Brenham?" Her voice quieted. "Were you at the diner?" Kalin pulled the folded note from her jacket pocket. "Yeah, table 7. Jasmine's face changed, not shock, not guilt, something softer, almost relief. "I didn't know how else to do it," Jasmine said. "Didn't even know if you'd recognize me, honestly. I didn't think you would." Kalin swallowed. "I wasn't sure at first, but then I remembered that night, the sandwich." "I remembered too," Jasmine said quietly. They stood there, not quite hugging, not quite strangers, the air between them filled with years that had passed but hadn't really gone anywhere. But Kalin still didn't understand. Jasmine had made her point with the note, so why show up in person? Jasmine motioned toward a side hallway that led away from the noise. Kalin followed, still unsure of what she was supposed to feel, gratitude, closure, confusion, probably a little of everything. They stepped outside, through an exit door propped open by a folding chair. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the pavement. Jasmine leaned against the wall and folded her arms loosely, as if she needed a second to find the right words. "I didn't go there to get noticed," she said. "I went because I'd finally reached the place in my life where I could face it, everything before the cameras, before the campaign, before I even believed I had a future." Kalin studied her face. It was calmer now, not polished like it had been on stage, but tired in a familiar way, the kind of tired that comes from carrying things too long. "You said in that interview you remembered me all this time," Kalin said. Jasmine nodded slowly. "You were the first person who didn't ask me what I'd done wrong. You didn't look at me like I was a problem to be fixed. You just sat with me. I wasn't used to that." Kalin looked down, kicking a pebble with her shoe. "I didn't think it mattered. I barely remember what I said, if anything." "That's just it," Jasmine replied. "You didn't have to say anything. You just stayed." Kalin leaned against the opposite wall, arms crossed. "So why now? Why leave the note? Why show up in Brenham, out of nowhere?" Jasmine exhaled. "Because I've spent years telling stories about change, how it happens, where it begins, and every time I speak, I think about that night, about you, and I kept wondering if I ever said thank you. I wasn't sure I did." Kalin felt her eyes sting. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "I know," Jasmine said, "but I needed to, not for politics, not for image, just for me." A silence fell between them, not awkward, just heavy. Jasmine continued, "You probably don't realize how far people carry the things others leave behind. That night, I was deciding whether to keep going. I was honestly on the edge. You didn't know that, you didn't ask, but you gave me a reason to pause." Kalin's voice came out quieter than she expected. "And now you're everything I didn't even imagine you could be." Jasmine smiled faintly. And you're still standing, working, grinding, giving more than you get. I knew you'd still be you. Kalin didn't know what to say to that. Compliments made her nervous, but Jasmine wasn't praising her to flatter, she was stating it like a fact, like she'd always known. I guess I've just been waiting for someone to notice, Kalin said, to notice that I've been trying, that I never stopped. Jasmine stepped closer. I noticed. They stood there, two women from different chapters of the same story, looking at each other through the lens of time and survival. Kalin finally asked, so what happens now? I don't know, Jasmine said. I didn't come to make promises. I just wanted to see you, to look you in the eye and say that moment mattered. Kalin swallowed hard. It did, for both of us. But as they walked back toward the parking lot, Kalin couldn't help but wonder, was Jasmine here only to say thank you, or was there something she still wasn't saying? Kalin didn't expect Jasmine to follow up, she figured that would be the end of it, a strange, full-circle encounter that left her with more clarity than she'd had in years. But 2 days later, a letter arrived in her mailbox, real paper, hand-addressed, no fancy logo or government seal. Inside, a note, not typed, not printed, written in the same careful handwriting as the one at the diner. You gave me something I didn't even realize I needed, permission to be seen without being judged. You didn't ask my name, my past, or my story. You didn't need to, you just gave what you had, a sandwich, a chair, a moment. It sounds small, but to someone drowning, that's everything. I didn't want to walk away from that diner without leaving a piece of that truth behind. I didn't want you to think your life hadn't touched anyone's, that kind of lie can stick to your bones. I know it stuck to mine for years. I never forgot you, I just didn't know how to find you until I did. And now that I have, I want to tell you something simple, you changed the course of a life, and that life has gone on to try and do the same. No signature this time, just a card tucked inside the envelope. On one side, the name of an organization Jasmine had founded, the Pause Project, focused on small-scale, immediate outreach to people facing crisis situations. On the other side, a short invitation, if you ever want to be part of something bigger, something that helps people the same way you helped me, this is a start. No pressure, just an open door. Kalin read the letter 3 times, then she folded it neatly and put it in her bag, not because she was ready to act on it right away, but because something about it felt like it needed to stay close. That night, the diner was slow, the tables were mostly empty, and the jukebox played a scratchy country ballad no one had asked for. She stood by the soda machine, staring out the window into the parking lot where an old Chevy idled in the corner, and thought about her life. For so long, it had felt like survival, wake up, work, count tips, try again. But now there was something else, a shift, a crack in the routine just wide enough to let something new grow through it. Rosa walked by, balancing 2 mugs of coffee. You okay? You've been real quiet today. Kalin smiled, a little unsure. Yeah, just thinking. Rosa raised an eyebrow. You thinking dangerous? Kalin laughed under her breath. Yeah, well, maybe it's time I started. Later, as she rolled silverware and wiped down tables, she couldn't help but wonder about all the people who passed through without saying a word, how many were drowning quietly, how many were one moment away from giving up, and how many Kalins were out there giving without knowing they were saving someone. She pulled out the letter again at the end of her shift and reread the final line, no pressure, just an open door. She tucked it away and clocked out, stepped into the night air. Something in her posture had changed, not dramatically, but enough. But even with that clarity, Kalin wasn't sure if she was ready to walk through that door, or if Jasmine's visit was only the beginning of something far more personal. It was Rosa who posted the story first. She'd overheard just enough of Kalin's side of the conversation on the phone the night after the letter arrived. Then she'd seen the card, asked a few questions, pressed a little harder than usual, and when Kalin finally gave in and told her everything, about the girl from years ago, the note, the diner, the follow-up, Rosa's mouth dropped open. Girl, she said, waving her phone, you don't get to keep that to yourself. People need to hear this. Kalin had shrugged, not convinced. It's just a story, Rosa replied, and the world is starving for a real one. She was right. By the following week, a local reporter picked up the thread from Rosa's post. The diner's name was in the headline, but it was Kalin's words that carried the weight. The article didn't romanticize it, no teary music, no flashy angles, just the truth, a waitress, a note, a memory, and a moment that stuck. Then the phones at the diner started ringing. First it was a local radio station, then a regional podcast, then somehow a national news outlet asking for a comment. Kalin said no to all of it. She didn't want to be famous, she didn't want the likes or the shares or the noise, she just wanted people to understand one thing, that you never really know the value of the smallest thing you give. It wasn't about Jasmine Crockett's title, it wasn't about going viral, it was about what it meant when one person saw another clearly on the worst day of their life and made space for them. Weeks passed, and the buzz died down, the crowds left the diner alone. Kalin got back to work, but something inside her had changed for good. She started bringing sandwiches to the corner lot every Thursday, where a handful of people waited under the gas station overhang, not to preach, not to make a point, just to show up. Some nights she'd go home and replay Jasmine's words, "You gave me a reason to pause." At first, she doubted whether that had really mattered, but now, watching strangers take food with that same cautious disbelief Jasmine once had, she knew it mattered. Everything did. And one night, long after closing, she sat on the back steps of the diner with Rosa, the stars stretching out overhead, and said, "I think I'm going to call the number." Rosa lit a cigarette. "The Pause Project?" Kalin nodded. "Yeah, I don't know what I can offer, but maybe I'm not supposed to know yet." Rosa took a long drag, then smiled. "Well, if they're lucky, they'll get the version of you who still brings gum to the overnight crew. That one's a keeper." They laughed, and for the first time in years, Kalin didn't feel tired all the way down to her bones, she felt awake. She didn't know what would come next, maybe she'd join the project, maybe she'd help build something, or maybe she'd stay right here, giving people reasons to breathe, one coffee refill, one sandwich, one soft word at a time. Because the real story wasn't that a congresswoman walked into a diner, it was that someone once stopped long enough to sit next to a stranger who needed saving and never even realized that in doing so, she'd saved herself too. So, if you're watching this and wondering whether what you do matters, it does. It always has, even if no one says thank you, even if they walk away and never look back. Somewhere out there, someone remembers you, and they're still carrying that moment with them. If this story meant something to you, or reminded you of a time someone showed up when you needed it most, don't let it stop with you. Share it, talk about it, pass it on. And if you're still standing, still trying, still showing up for others, don't stop now. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us who we are when we're at our best. Hit like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments, who came out on top in this elite showdown.